Okay, let's start this deep dive with maybe a bit of a challenge to how we usually think. When we look back at big financial crashes,
Yeah.
in 1907, 2008, our first instinct is often to look for the flaws in the system. We think, okay, the answer must be more rules, better regulation.
Right.
But what if that's not the whole story? What if the real recurring problem isn't the system itself, but, well, us, human nature?
That's exactly the provocative idea at the heart of the book we're looking at today. The author argues, pretty convincingly, I think, that history shows us again and again. It doesn't matter how many laws we pass, how complex the finance gets, people will find new ways to believe that the good times can last forever. So it's putting greed, maybe over-optimism, right alongside those systemic flaws as drivers of these crises.
That really does set the stage. So, welcome everyone to a bold new take on book coverage. This is our extended analysis. It's more than just a summary, although we do cover the basics. We really dig into how the author makes their case, how they build credibility, and how they earn or maybe sometimes lose your trust. Basically, we want to give you the tools to read more critically with sharper insight.
And help you answer that key question, should you read this book? Hopefully this deep dive helps you figure that out. It's also, I think, really useful for any aspiring writers out there, seeing how complex narrative journalism works structurally. It's invaluable. And hey, if you find this deeper format useful, please let us know. We really value your feedback. It helps us shape what we do next.
Definitely. And remember, as we get into this historical drama, you are experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation. It's powered by Google's NotebookLM, allowing for, we hope, a deeper and more dynamic analysis.
So the book is 1929, Inside the Greatest Crash in Wall Street History by Andrew Ross Sorkin. And the timing, published in 2025, it feels incredibly relevant. We're seeing financial leaders right now fretting publicly about the stock market falling to earth.
Yeah, that urgency is real. We need that historical perspective now to understand today's market jitters.
Yeah.
And Sorkin,
Oh, yeah.
wow, he establishes his authority right out of the gate, even before page 1 almost. Let's start there with his credibility, his ethos.
Oh, absolutely. His credibility is, frankly, immense. He's a major name in financial journalism, not just a longtime reporter for the New York Times, but also co-anchor of CNBC's Squawk Box. He's right there talking to the key players today.
And critically, he's tackled this kind of subject before very successfully. His book, Too Big to Fail, on the 2008 crisis, that became the definitive account for many people. So when Sorkin writes about a crash, people listen. They remember his track record in explaining these massive financial events.
Exactly. But beyond just his name recognition, the trust he builds in 1929 comes from the sheer depth of his research. It's meticulous. This isn't just retelling old stories. He's built this documented drama based on really digging into the sources.
Tell us a bit more about that research, because the level of detail, that's what makes the narrative so compelling, right?
Right.
What did he actually uncover?
He went deep. Really deep. Private letters, tons of oral histories, even architectural plans to reconstruct scenes. Critics highlighted things like his use of an unpublished memoir that allowed him to paint these incredibly vivid pictures almost moment by moment. Plus, corporate filings, and this is impressive, undisclosed discussions from inside the Federal Reserve Bank of New York at the time.
Wow. Using architectural plans or a diary entry,
Yeah.
it just makes it feel so concrete, doesn't it? It tells you, look, this isn't just speculation. This happened to these specific people in this room on this day. It really elevates it beyond just history. It feels immersive.
And that immersion is absolutely central to his strategy. He's clearly writing for two kinds of readers at once. You've got the finance pros who will appreciate the nuances from the Fed notes, for example, but also the general reader, someone who just wants a gripping story, a cautionary tale about booms and busts. He manages to speak to both.
That dual audience focus leads us right into his narrative strategy. The how of the book. Sorkin explicitly said he wasn't aiming for dry economic theory. He wanted to create this immersive, character-focused story, to make readers, quote, feel like they were actually in the room as the drama unfolded. He's going for pathos, for that emotional connection.
Absolutely. That emotional core is key to how he persuades you. He uses very evocative language, dramatic scene setting. He creates this, what some critics called a gallery of rogues, these larger-than-life figures whose confidence, their arrogance even, is just fascinating.
You definitely see that in the descriptions of wealth. They're almost theatrical. Elegant mansions and champagne yachts.
Yeah.
It taps into that universal fascination with huge wealth, high-stakes gambling, and, well, spectacular failure. It's hard to look away.
Right. That's why you see reviews mentioning the book's pulpy excitement or its true crime thrills. He hooks you with the people involved, making the crash feel personal, not just like a series of abstract economic events.
And structurally, how does he pull that off?
Well, he uses a pretty clear chronological framework, starting
Hmm.
in February 1929, moving through the crash, the aftermath. But he weaves that timeline around the key characters. We follow figures like Sunshine Charlie Mitchell through the whole arc of the disaster.
It's really skillful, creative nonfiction, using details like historical weather data or those personal diaries to make scenes feel utterly real, almost cinematic. The book is definitely designed to be experienced.
Mm.
Okay, but let's pause here for a second. If the research is that good, and he clearly wants us to learn from the past, does that intense focus on drama maybe overshadow the analysis? We need to look at the substance, the logos. Is the underlying argument solid, or does the storytelling sometimes maybe get in the way of the hard questions?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? And yes, there's a trade-off. While the sequence of events is meticulously documented, Sorkin makes a very deliberate choice to steer clear of heavy economic theory. He prefers to show you the pattern of human behavior, the repeating mistakes, rather than deeply explain the complex systemic or economic forces at play.
Right. And I found myself wondering, if the goal is partly to warn us about today, where's the deep dive into, say, regulatory structures or economic policy implications? Some critics pointed this out, suggesting that his very accessible, dramatic style sometimes relies on, well, maybe familiar tropes or cliches.
Yeah.
One review memorably said it had too much makeup and not enough clothes.
Yeah.
A bit harsh, maybe, but it points to that potential lack of analytical depth.
That criticism cuts right to the core of his approach, I think. He seems to prioritize making the story engaging and accessible to a very wide audience. He doesn't want the average reader getting bogged down in, dense policy analysis. But the consequence, as you said, is potentially a gap in the argument for some readers.
Yeah, that analytical limit. Critics noted he seems, quote, strangely incurious about the political implications of his narrative. By focusing so intensely on the personalities, the drama, which is captivating, no doubt, he does tend to gloss over maybe the institutional failures, the political decisions, or lack thereof, that allowed things to get so out of hand.
So if you're picking up this book hoping for, say, a detailed blueprint on how to prevent the next 1929 specific policy proposals, you might feel a bit let down. Critics felt he didn't quite deliver on the, quote, grandest ambitions for a really comprehensive structural analysis. He gives you the compelling characters, the villains perhaps, but maybe not the detailed legislative solutions.
It feels like a conscious choice, though. Maybe focus on the timeless human element, because specific policies are always debatable, always changing. But in doing that, he does kind of sidestep the pressing debates about whether today's regulations are enough, navigating these kinds of arguments where powerful storytelling meets maybe some analytical restraint. It really requires critical thinking from us, the readers. You have to constantly ask, where is the author succeeding brilliantly in telling the story, and where are they perhaps pulling back from the thornier analytical issues?
And that reflection, that kind of critical engagement, is exactly what we aim for in these analyses. Actually, speaking of critical thought, if you enjoy this kind of deep dive that looks closely at a book's arguments and structure, check out Mindful Moments. That's our YouTube channel. We offer AI book analyses, summaries, critiques, all designed to inspire reflection and rational thought. It's a great resource for engaging more deeply with books.
Good point. So, bringing it back to Sorkin's 1929 and its relevance today, let's consider his overall rhetorical goal. He doesn't explicitly say, look, 1929 is exactly like today, but he very skillfully encourages you to see the echoes, to draw parallels, as he puts it, between the narratives that Wall Street crafted back then and those of the present.
Right. He lets the history itself serve as the warning. When you read about the almost blind optimism back then, the belief that stock prices could only go up, it's almost impossible not to think about some of the market manias we've seen more recently, maybe extreme tech valuations or the rush into complex new investment products. The details change, the technology changes, but that human element, it feels disturbingly familiar.
He lets the drama carry the persuasive weight.
Yeah.
Which circles back perfectly to his final core insight. By placing the ultimate blame, or perhaps responsibility, not just on broken systems, but on flawed human behavior, he essentially justifies his entire character-driven approach.
Exactly. The ultimate lesson he leaves you with is that this pattern just keeps repeating. Systems might get tweaked, laws rewritten, but that fundamental human desire for easy, fast wealth, that seems constant. His closing thought that no matter how many warnings are issued or how many laws are written, people will find new ways to believe that the good times can last forever. That's the real kicker. It keeps the focus squarely on hubris and human nature, not congressional hearings.
So that leads us to our final provocative question for you, the listener, to think about. Given Sorkin's deliberate choice, focusing on personality, on the gripping narrative rather than deep economic or policy analysis, does this incredibly entertaining story of 1929 maybe distract us from the specific, perhaps tedious systemic reforms we might need today? Or is it the other way around? Does the sheer power of these characters, these human stories of ambition and folly, provide the most effective, the most memorable cautionary tale, the kind that actually sticks with us?
That's the central tension, I think. A really interesting question to ponder, especially as you watch the current market unfold.
Click the link on screen for the in-depth book summary. Subscribe, share, purchase via link, and please think rationally.